Hi, and welcome to the week 8, day 2 video lecture. We'll talk more about the text-based expectations for the draft and a little bit more about primary research and secondary sources. So I'm going to start with audience and how is audience important to this research memo? In order to write a memo that focuses on purpose and audience, you need to figure out who your audience is. You should already know this, but it could also mean that you're panicking and you realize you need to perform an online search to find an organization that can implement the changes that you're calling for, that you're researching. Then when you're writing a report, you can gear it toward that audience, and you should gear it toward that specific audience. Based on your chosen problem for project 3, find an organization that would serve as a group that can implement your research. They've asked you to research this. In other words, this group can take action to address this real world professional problem. For example, if your problem is about water pollution, you would either want to find an audience of environmental nonprofit groups or city planners. The memo would vary based on which of these audiences you picked, the information you're going to include, because environmental nonprofits would be more interested in environmental effects of the problem, while city planners would be more interested in the resources needed and the cost benefit analysis. And in this way, your audience, your boss, impacts how your memo and your research is structured. To identify your audience, you should search on Google or wherever for a specific individual or group that can take action on your problem. You should identify the individual or group by name and then try answering the following questions about your audience for yourself. This is not an assignment in a formal way. So the questions on the screen could help you better understand your audience and better imagine that you're writing this to your project team in a workplace. It's going to help put you in that mind frame of writing this document for your organization in order to research this professional problem. Still, real world research doesn't always rely on scholarly research. And for professional purposes, any type of source can be deemed credible if it's not outright lying. Yourself, will this info help your target audience, your boss, make a decision? If so, it's credible enough, while also considering the possible limitations of how the research was obtained and what is actually written there. So the post on the screen is discussing the money spent on political ads and how the user and maybe a larger population feels cheated by this in some way. Now the math, if you think about it, in the tweet does not add up. So the tweet itself is misrepresenting a fact. That does not negate the fact that there's real sentiment behind the tweet. There's feeling there about an injustice that could still be discussed, and it's still illustrating a user concern. So although a real world post could illustrate real user concern, it might not be the most credible, like the tweet we just reviewed. An impacted population member, user, they could be mistaken, they could be lying, and also simply because you review a tweet or a Google review, this doesn't mean that you know definitively about the problem. This is why it's better to review a range of tweets, Reddit posts, or Google reviews, maybe 20 to 30, rather than just one. Likewise, for surveys, it's best to disclose the number of respondents that you got. For this project, 5 or more is fine, though by all means try to get more than 5. And you should also discuss the type of respondents in your memo, like were they mostly students, women, men in their 50s. For interviews, it's best to interview a career professional rather than a friend, as their position instills greater credibility of their answers, rather than if you interviewed your friend or someone who didn't know much on the topic. However, any form of primary research response, whether it's incorrect or it's not representative of a large sample, still exemplifies some pathos of the impacted population, how they're feeling. And this should also be considered. You can bolster the credibility of your primary sources by balancing it with secondary sources. This is where the pro-con database, it might help you find articles, websites that are based on your topic. The information might be general, but you can use it to compare it with stats or local information on the community you're focusing on for your problem. Password for the rough draft this week is Hell on Wheels, a really great show on AMC Plus or Prime Video. So going back to the pro-con database that you can find 2 ways. Option 1 is the top image on the screen. You can log in from the link I've provided in modules with Understanding Concepts 8.2, or option 2 is to click onto the USF library page, search the databases Gale and Context Opposing Viewpoints. But once you access the pro-con database and you've logged in and you can access everything, type in a few words about your topic and the location to narrow down your search. On the screen, there's example of a search that might help add to the background or definition or causes of the problem sections. I also have search terms on the screen, examples that could help you narrow down your search. And pro-con is great because it'll help you find articles, sure, but even videos or websites about your topic, like I've highlighted on the screen on that second picture. Whenever you type in your topic, it'll show you a breakdown of the types of secondary sources you can review. So it's possible to use pro-con as your one-stop shop to obtain both your academic and your popular source for the P3 research memo. So pro-con is just one option for finding a secondary source to add to the background explanation or causes of the problem section. It's okay if the article or the secondary source does not directly relate to your community, your impacted population area. Maybe it's discussing drinking water conditions in all of Florida, but your location is Tampa Bay. You can still use the article as a secondary source and discuss how it's an example of the water quality in the state and how that low quality is still impacting Tampa Bay. So when thinking of how you can use anything from one of your secondary sources, you can start with answering questions about the source for yourself. I featured those questions on the screen. So you might think about briefly summarizing your source. By summarizing your source in this way, you'll have information to choose from about the secondary source, which you can then incorporate into the relevant sections of the research memo. So to know where you want to input your primary and secondary research, it helps to have an outline. Outlines are boring, but in the workplace, they can be essential because organization starts with knowing your expectations and knowing the design factors. And once you know that, the expectations and the outline, the template, you can then ask and learn what's expected of the document overall. With an outline, you'll know which piece of secondary source information is more pertinent, like fitting together a puzzle piece. You can also construct pieces of the text together by having an an outline document on your phone, maybe filling it in during downtime. I did that so many times to complete essays or research papers while I was still in school. Contrary to popular opinion, outlines are pretty cool. On the screen, there's the basic template of the research summary memo. You can also review this template later in 8.2 Understanding Concepts. It's also available when you click on to the research memo assignment guidelines for the rough draft. So these are all the textual expectations of the document. You can look to student examples and see how they've implemented the very same headers you see into their document, and they've instilled design features as well. However, using this basic template, this is essentially all the memo headers, it's going to help you fill in your own ideas to start drafting, keeping in mind that each one of the sections, background, explanation, causes, each need an in-text citation of some kind, such as a footnote, endnote, or hyperlink. And then the impacted population section is probably where you're going to input the screen grab of your primary research and discuss it there. And that's your citation for that section of a kind. So this is an aside, but it's an important thing to start thinking about for my face-to-face classes. Start considering a way to present your problem in a visual way. Think of a poster, a meme, something that can quickly convey the purpose and audience. For my online classes, don't worry about this assignment. It's basically how I form the groups based on the most interesting project 3 problems, but I'm just going to do that manually for y'all because it's too complicated for an online. Let's review Canvas now. Okay. So when we go to Canvas, there was some stuff you should have already finished, and you email or you reach out to me if you didn't understand any of it or you don't understand the one assignment that you have left, drafting the research summary memo. Even though it's a memo and you shouldn't be worrying about APA or MLA format, maybe you still open up your go-to document to start filling it out. But again, you shouldn't be incorporating any of this when you submit the memo. I don't care about MLA or APA or double spacing for a memo or for a progress report or anything like that. So you click on the draft of the research summary, and I have that outline, that template for you that you should take, copy, you should paste it onto here. I did already, and I already have the video lecture password there so I don't forget. It's Hell on Wheels. And then I was working ahead for y'all that a reminder, you need a screen grab of your primary research. Maybe you used OmniSci TweetMap, maybe you used Twitter, Google Reviews, Glassdoor, I don't know, whatever you used, you need to screen grab it, crop it nicely, size it accordingly. You need to right click it and style it so that it pops a little bit, right? And it's not just flat. And then you need to right click it again and insert a caption according to the standards we've already learned from project 2. And then you have your template, start filling out this information based on your primary and secondary sources. Look to the student examples if you're very lost still, which is files, project 3 docs, student samples of P3 research memo, because you know that you have to, yes, write about it, but you also have to use in-text citations based on whichever citation method you feel is appropriate. This student used this method. They incorporated their primary research, a few pictures. You only need to have one. This student went a different way for the design of their memo and how they incorporated their outside research and how they incorporated their primary research. We see they used Voyant because they looked at probably some reviews, like, oh, they had survey questions and they had text-based answers, and they ran those text-based answers through Voyant, which is an option. You don't have to do it. So look to some of the samples to get an idea, never using any of the phrasing from there. Write what you're going to write, and then take what you have, copy it, and get a template that actually looks like a memo. So you're going to go to new. If you're using Word, you're going to type in memo here. It'll pull up some templates you could use. Probably the less busy is best, right? You don't want it to look ridiculous. So this one is great. You could use a different one, and then input your information here, your draft that you completed. I don't know why it only did my picture. But have your text there. Have your text there. Do your text wrapping however you need so that you can put your picture where it needs to go, so that you can discuss it just the way you did with project 2, except now you're just discussing your screen grab and how it's relevant to your problem. So it feels like a lot, but if you finished your primary research, you have those secondary sources, it's going to be easier to fill this out. And you only have to fill in 2 pages. It doesn't have to be very long, and it shouldn't be. Think of all those people at your business in the to line, your boss's name, not my name. They don't have a lot of time. They want to quickly review this professional problem and understand why it's a problem. And then maybe they're going to move forward with it for a project proposal or a solution of some sort. So you have questions, you reach out to me via email or text me on WhatsApp. That's the quickest way to get in touch with me. You have a great rest of your week.